1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hello, Brookline. I'm Heather Hamilton, temporarily filling in for your usual big member host, Tommy Vitolo. Tommy may or may not be on a road trip, selling Girl Scout cookies, or growing a trucker stash. But he is definitely spending quality time with the family. So you're stuck with me. The United States Senate passed the Republican taxation and spending bill by one vote, with Vice President Vance breaking the tie and 3 Republicans joining all Democrats in voting no. The bill would cut taxes primarily for the wealthy, reduce social safety net programs, and add to the national debt. It now goes back to the House for final approval. President Trump announced the opening of Alligator Alcatraz, an ICE detention center located in Miami. The facility is built on a tropical swamp and includes a sea of tents and trailers where people will be held before being deported. A new study published in The Lancet estimates that USAID saved 92 million lives from 2001 to 2021, and its loss could prevent avoiding the death of 14 million people by 2030. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell said Friday that a Trump executive order halting birthright citizenship for babies born to immigrants will not take effect in the state. Republic Services trash collection workers, represented by the Teamsters, launched a strike on Tuesday. Union members are demanding a contract with improved wages, better benefits, and stronger labor protections. 24 of 28 Massachusetts emergency shelters located in hotels will be closed as of this coming Monday. Governor Maura Healey also announced that the final 4 are expected to close by July 31st. The town of Brookline hired Jack Schleffer as the new urban forest manager. Brookline's former tree warden, Tom Brady, departed the role to become the Watertown Director of Public Works. The town and the Brookline Firefighters Union have agreed to a 3-year contract that ends the dispute over staffing levels. The deal includes a wage increase, changes to sick leave, and resolution to overtime staffing. Beginning July 1st, 2025, Casella Waste Systems will collect solid waste in addition to the weekly curbside collection of recycling. And now back to your regularly scheduled program, where Tommy interviews Biking Brookline Chair David Kroop.
And welcome back to TV on TV, right here on Brookline Interactive Group. As promised, we have an incredible guest today. We have David Kroop, the president of Biking Brookline. David, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for including me on your show.
Now, David, we want to hear all about Biking Brookline. I know there's the organization does a lot of different things, but first we want to learn a little bit about you. So what is it you've been doing your whole life?
Sure. So you said my whole life, so I will start with my childhood. I would say there were 2 key events that I think shaped my childhood, and I also think inform a lot of the work of Biking Brookline. The first, I grew up just north of Central Park in Manhattan on the west side, and when I was 7 years old, John Lindsay, the mayor, announced that he would close the main road in Central Park to cars on Sundays, making it available to bicycling. And so my family, we headed over there to experience this. And I just thought it was like the most wonderful thing that had happened in my entire life up to that date, for all sorts of reasons. One is just the incredible joy of being on a bicycle, but also the feeling of independence that I had, even though my parents were there. My sister and I would speed ahead and then wait for them. And I think that's an important aspect of bicycling, giving children a chance to experience increased independence as they get older. The third thing was just this amazing feeling of accomplishment, because we were going to all these places that in the past we had driven to. So there were parking lots in Central Park, and we'd go to the carousel by car, and it just felt amazing to me that we could actually bike from our house to all these places. When I was 7, unlike many children in Brookline I've met, I was not a big transportation policy wonk, nor did I read the New York Times. But I was curious, thinking back on this, well, how did the New York Times report about this? So I went back and I looked to find the articles. And needless to say, there was a lot of pushback and opposition to this. The transportation commissioner did not like the idea. He said it would cause all sorts of traffic problems all around the park. And, looking back on it, I think most people would say that that decision to close the park was probably one of the most important steps in the revitalization of New York City, and the increase in people's daily quality of life. And I look at that from the perspective of my own family and realizing that it kind of changed the way we interacted with the city. We ceased to drive to Central Park. We started to bicycle to Central Park. And, later in life, I realized my parents were no longer driving to places that they had when we were kids. They would walk through Central Park. And why wouldn't they? It's, one of the most beautiful parks in the world. And the only answer is that you wouldn't walk through the park if you have to walk next to a 3-lane freeway with cars. So when I look at that, I think that it's kind of an illustration, even though it was a long time ago, about the potential for change, and that we don't have to assume that cars are inevitable, the number of cars are static, we can change things and make them better. The second key event was when I was 14 years old. New York City was notorious for deferred maintenance on its public ways, and there was a highway, an elevated highway on the west side of Manhattan that literally collapsed under the weight of a truck one day. The city, much to its credit, decided it would be a good idea to close the highway. But like many other things at that time, they didn't make much of an effort to keep pedestrians and bicyclists off this highway. And so on the southbound side, where there was no gaping hole, you could just ride the whole way down from Midtown to the tip of Manhattan, which I discovered was this like amazing way to get around the city. Living on the Upper West Side, I could go all the way down to South Ferry. And it somewhat, I guess at that age, I started thinking more in terms of bicycling from a policy perspective and thinking, why don't we accommodate this mode? And it's, just such a great way to get around. That was basically how I got around Manhattan in my teen years. And then moving past childhood now to adult years, when I finished law school, I went back to New York, and I really wanted to be able to bike to work, but the practical reality is it just wasn't possible. I mean, New York had no bicycling infrastructure. Sadly, the West Side Highway, they finally demolished it. Otherwise, it would have been great. And over time, depending on where I worked, sometimes I could figure out, oh, well, actually, you might be able to bike over there if you're really creative. And I guess I came to realize most people don't view bicycling as transportation, except a small group of people I knew. But then over the last, few decades, we've seen a change where I think more people do recognize that. And that kind of explains Biking Brookline, which was formed about 9 years ago. Basically, a whole bunch of us who were getting around by bicycle, who were commuting by bicycle at a time when there still was pretty limited infrastructure, saw that there was a movement in Boston for better bicycling infrastructure, but we weren't seeing that movement in Brookline. And we felt that we needed to communicate to town decision makers that there really is a large group of people who want this. And so 20 of us who really didn't know each other that well at the time, but kind of recognized each other as being people we would see bicycling, got together and formed Biking Brookline.
And so it exists, but it's certainly not 20 people from 9 years ago. It's a mature organization. What would you say they do here? What's Biking Brookline all about?
Yeah, so we've grown from 20 to about 1,200. We have a board of directors of 9 people who I'm very indebted to. And then we have many other people who volunteer in Biking Brookline. Too many to mention, but just to say, our directors include lots of leaders in Brookline, people who are town meeting members, on town boards and commissions, who co-lead major town nonprofit organizations. And our focus is really on 2 areas. One is advocacy. We want to see better bicycling infrastructure in Brookline. And the other is group rides and workshops, which is focused on trying to help people realize the potential of bicycling and to help them figure out how they can get out on a bicycle and really get around the Boston area by bicycle.
Let's start by talking about advocacy. I know that you're involved in a couple of different ways, and the place I'd like to start is with elections. You, Biking Brookline, are not policy makers. Though you have some town meeting members and other people who are members, but part of the game is to have elected officials, policy makers who get it, who
Yeah.
understand your vision, and maybe who share it. And so surely you have an interest in elections. So
Yeah.
how does Biking Brookline interact with elections?
Sure. So each year we distribute to town election candidates a questionnaire where we ask them about bicycling related issues. Initially, we just asked select board candidates and town meeting member candidates, and we debated a little bit about town meeting members because there are so many of them, and it's, purely, it's all town positions are purely voluntary, but town meeting members have somewhat little influence each person, and we thought it was a heavy lift for them, but we went ahead anyway. And if anyone's looked at our candidate questionnaire, you can see it's a heavy lift. We're the only, I'm maybe not the only organization, but our questionnaire has a long reading list attached to it. We don't just ask people what they think. We say, what do you think about this? Providing them with a town policy or a warrant article or an article about an issue or a town report like the recent Stan Tech Coolidge Corner parking study. So we've been really delighted by the response. Every select board candidate has responded to every Biking Brookline questionnaire. On the town meeting side, about 40% of candidates respond, but that's a pretty impressive number when you consider so many races are not contested, and even those that are, it's frequently like 6 candidates for 5 positions. If you actually look at total town meeting, all 255 town meeting members, much more than 40% have actually responded to a Biking Brookline questionnaire. Some people respond one time they run, but then they don't respond the next time. But among other things, it's helped us really identify how elected people in Brookline feel about bicycling. And one thing that's been really encouraging is the town meeting member candidates, and more significantly, the members are very pro-bicycling. And, we have a whole, I could say, database of people who we know support us. And so, for example, on one advocacy issue, Washington Street, when we started advocating for it and thinking, how can we persuade the select board that this is something the town really wants? We literally went down our list of town meeting members, read their replies to the Biking Brookline questionnaires from all the prior years, and then reached out to those who we felt were most supportive. And it allowed us to show the town that the select board, significantly over half the town meeting members, were supporting this project.
So let's talk about advocacy. You mentioned Washington Street, which is a project being paid for by the state with federal money.
Yeah.
Therefore comes with, clear expectations about what a modern roadway would look like. For those who don't know, the scope is roughly Washington Street from Washington Square all the way down to Route 9. That last portion, many people think is Harvard Street. It's actually Washington Street.
Mhm.
And certainly there was some broad town conversation, but it seems like folks found a solid, good place, a good outcome on that. The work isn't done yet, of course. What are
Yeah.
some other examples of roadways that you've been involved in, and how did it go?
Yeah, so although our main focus is Brookline, we sometimes do work with other organizations in the Boston area where we feel we have a mutual interest. Certainly one was the Boston University Bridge, which many bicyclists feel had a very uncomfortable feeling both on the bridge and also getting off the bridge. Tragically, as you know, a bicyclist, John Cochran, was killed on the Cambridge side within the last year. So we joined an alliance of many bicycling groups in the Boston area to basically work to advocate among all the various agencies that have authority over the bridge, which was quite a large number, I might add. So we were dealing with DCR, the City of Boston, MassDOT, even MBTA. But that would be an example of one where we did weigh in. And although Brookline, I always feel Brookline kind of its members are very Brookline residents are very motivated and very active. So when we say members of Biking Brookline, really all that means is that you're on you're on our email list. But unlike other organizations, when we send out an email, people read it. Like 60% of people read our emails. So for example, one of our contributions to the BU Bridge project was organizing a petition in support of the changes to the bridge, some of which have now been implemented, some of which we're still waiting for. But it was interesting to me that there were more Brookline signatures on that petition than any other jurisdiction, even though we only have like 60,000 residents. Obviously, we're very close to the bridge, but so is Cambridge and Boston. So we do try to support other organizations on their issues, and particularly with the BU Bridge, where, of course, many Brookline residents cross the bridge every day to go to work in Cambridge. So that would be another example.
So let's talk about higher level. We talked about specific projects where block by block, intersection by intersection, every set of details is unique. There are no two
Yeah,
streets, I think, in Brookline that are the same by
yeah,
any sort of topological perspective.
yeah,
Let's talk about policies, big
yeah.
picture things. Where are we, and where should we be going as a town?
Yeah, so Brookline has some really great policies in support of making our streets safer and accessible to all users using all modes. These policies include, first, the Complete Streets policy, which is actually a policy adopted under Massachusetts state law, which basically says if a town adopts a Complete Streets policy approved by the state, we will provide funding for some Complete Streets projects. Um, Complete Streets Projects basically says that we should design our roadways to be accessible to people of all ages and abilities using all modes of transportation. It doesn't require that we do that, immediately, or it doesn't demand any particular project, but it does require an approach when we are doing projects. Not all projects, it depends on the project. And one of the issues in Brookline has been, well, when do we create bicycling infrastructure? And the Complete Street Project policy initially said, anytime you do work on a road, you have to apply Complete Streets policies. That was an issue because there were places where really it might not have been a high priority and it was costing money. I think the town wisely changed the policy recently. Now it's much more based on the specific characteristics of the road and how important it is. But it's still a critical policy, and it articulates the town's vision that people should really be able to get around using any mode of transportation, which I think advances so many policies, economic equity, economic opportunity, economic development. I mean, I think it's really important, like if we want to increase commercial development, that people, companies thinking of coming here can tell their employees, by the way, you can bike here to Brookline. It is safe to come to Brookline. And, the importance of that, I think you can see if you go over to Cambridge and you look at companies like Novartis and Pfizer and others, and look at their, bike room, in their garage. And I think Complete Streets is really critical, not only in terms of its practical application, but in terms of the vision that it articulates. And then there are others
Speaking
as
of
well.
vision, I've
Yes,
also seen a lot of language around Vision Zero. Seems
yes.
to me if you're moving around on the streets, your vision better be better than zero, right?
Yeah, well, that's not what Vision Zero, the use of vision in that term means. No, Vision Zero is really it's a philosophy, I guess, or an approach, and maybe it's the word, to how to make our roads safe. And its goal is to say we should seek to have no serious injuries or fatalities on our road. And of course, you might say, well, hasn't that always been the case? Well, maybe, but we haven't really had a strategy around that. And to some degree, we've kind of just said, well, sometimes accidents happen. Vision Zero is a very different approach. It basically says accidents don't have to happen. We can examine our roads, we can figure out what causes accident. We should say crashes, because even as one of the aspects of Vision Zero is the term accident is a bad word because it implies it's inevitable. So we should look at, why do crashes happen? Why do some crashes result in injuries or serious injuries or fatalities? How can we design our roads to reduce that? And it includes many tools for doing that, like thinking about, how do pedestrians cross a busy road and how can we make them safer when they do? And its most significant focus is on speed, which has been motor vehicle speed, which has been documented, in this kind of obvious basic physics. The faster the car is moving, the more likely that there will be a serious injury or fatality. And a lot of Vision Zero is based on what design elements tend to cause motor vehicles to move more slowly. And it's also significantly, it's not based on an enforcement emphasis, because enforcement, as we know, is very difficult. It's much more based on how can we induce people to behave responsibly.
So as much as I'd like to keep talking about advocacy, we don't have a lot of time left. I want to bring up, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. I think my viewers will be able to see it. Biking Brookline also amongst all the other things that you're busy doing, does there's group rides. And I think group rides are kind of an exciting idea. Let me see if I can work all the magic at once. Here we go. Let's see what happens. Maybe our viewers can see. This is what we're showing is an example of a group ride. And what I can see are different kinds of people and different kinds of bicycles. And my guess is different levels of fitness. So how did it all happen on the same group ride?
Yeah, sure. So we decided to start doing group rides about 4 to 5 years ago. And our focus is really related to our advocacy, in the sense that we want people to experience what it means to get around by bicycle. And we mean ordinary people, not recreational or fitness riders, but just people who might decide, I'm going to bike downtown to the theater tonight, or I am having lunch with a friend in Cambridge. Why did I just bike over there?
Or I'm going to bike to work today.
Yes, exactly. And so one of the things we realized is that people really they can't visualize how they'd get there. And, part of the reason is that we have a whole roadway for cars. It's very easy for motorists to figure out. But in terms of identifying a safe route to get places by bicycle, it's increasingly possible in Boston, thanks to the rollout of bike networks in Boston and Somerville and Cambridge, as well as DCR really expanding the bike trail network. But there's still a question of understanding how all these things connect. So what we did at Biking Brookline is we developed basically a library of routes, and we have about 20 of them, and they're all on the website if you keep scrolling down on that page. And so our group rides are basically very welcoming, inclusive. We ride at a very modest pace. We don't leave riders behind. We ride as a group. You're not on your own. We have somebody at the front who leads, somebody in the back who makes sure nobody gets left behind. And we've really had wonderful experiences going out to, like, our destinations have included places that sound far, but they're really within reach, and on low stress routes, places like places like Salem, where we come back on the ferry, East Boston, Deer Island, Nahant, Waltham. We've tended to do kind of 15 to 25, maybe 30-mile routes, although one of our goals, next thing, is to do a Brookline-based ride, which is specifically designed for families and children with, let's say, an ice cream destination at the end. Something where parents can kind of try it out and see how they do. We have had children, including a 6-year-old girl who rode the whole way to Salem, and she wrote a book about it on our website. If you keep we've published it on our website. But we realized for many parents that sounds like a heavy lift. So this is one of our ideas. We're hoping we'll do it this summer. The other thing is people really don't know a lot of really basic mechanics on their bicycle. You'd be surprised how many people say, I haven't ridden because I have a flat tire. And like, this has been 3 years now. You know, it's not hard to fix a flat tire. So we have a wonderful, our vice president, Emily Jacobson, is also a very good bike mechanic. She leads a workshop where she teaches people, you know, these basic skills.
I will tell you, I know exactly how to fix a flat. I bring it to a bike shop and I exchange money for not getting this suit dirty. For some people, that's also a great answer. There's now a bicycle shop on Cypress Street, just south of Route 9.
Yeah.
There's a bicycle shop at the St. Mary's District.
Yes.
There's a bicycle shop on Com Ave where the address is Boston, but they're paying Brookline property taxes. So we'll love to have them. Right. So there's some real options.
Yeah, that's all good advice. Although being able to fix a flat is pretty useful, important skill.
I'll take your word for it.
We teach. I know you know how to fix a flat, Tommy.
I honestly, I mean, I could probably figure it out. I've never changed a flat in my life.
Oh, wow. Oh,
no, I walk my bike to the next bike shop and I get on a blue bike. Yeah, I leave the bike there and then I get on a blue bike and I go home and a couple of days later I come back and it's fixed.
Well, that definitely, yeah, that works. Yeah.
Well, listen, David, we're out of time. Things move quick around here on TV. I'm very grateful for you coming on and telling us about Biking Brookline. Now, there is a website. It was on the screen briefly, but tell us what the URL is so people can find it.
Yeah, sure. It's just bikingbrookline.org. No periods, just one word, bikingbrookline.org.
There it is. And so, folks, if you're interested in the advocacy, if you're interested in the group rides, if you're interested in learning how to change a flat, go to bikingbrookline.org, get involved with the organization. Folks like me, I'm just going to keep riding because for me, it's cheaper, it's faster, and helps make sure I can keep fitting in this suit. Things that are useful to me. But different people ride for different reasons, and welcome all of them, right?
Yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me.
David, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Folks, you've been watching TV on TV right here on Brookline Interactive Group. We're glad you stayed with us, and we'll see you again next week.